Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Some notes before we start. In order to avoid interference, we muted everybody until the end. If you have any questions in the meantime, please write them in the chat. We will be monitoring it regularly. And if you face any technical difficulties with Zoom during this presentation, please note that the session will be recorded and broadcasted on YouTube and then shared with you later. So we'll have the opportunity to watch it again. And any recording that will be made public will, of course, first be edited in order to ensure everybody's anonymity. And with that, I welcome you to the How to Use Genesys webinar part 2. My name is Christelle Rabil, and I'm the Genesys assistant at the Crop Trust. Um, we organized a webinar on how to use Genesys part 1 in February earlier this year. And in case you missed it, I'm pasting a link in the chat for you to watch. During this first part, we focused mainly on first a background of Genesys. So it was a very general introduction at first. And we focused also on going over the user interface, how to log in, how to access the translations, how to filter passport data manually, and how to request material from gene banks via Genesys, and how to download passport data. So after this first part, in February, we carried out a user survey to gauge which of the tools we have in Genesys are most used and most known. And based on the results, which I am also sharing in the chat, this session will focus on other tools such as filtering passport data using our new Genesys AI search, and also how to query trade data, characterization, and evaluation data directly in Genesys. We'll also focus on the Genesys R package that allows you to avoid downloading different sheets of data and just connect to the Genesys database via the R software. And we'll also highlight to you means of feedback and how to reach us for support, which in the user survey, we noticed that not a lot of people may know about. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and jump directly to Genesys and start presenting to you first how to use the Genesys AI search. So I am now here in Genesys and I am already logged in. As you can see here from this icon, we covered how to register an account in Genesys and how to log in the first webinar. You will be able to access a lot of tools in Genesys if you're logged in, including, for now, the Genesys AI. So in order to access Genesys AI, you will go from the main menu to accession data, passport data, and you will see there are two tabs on the left-hand side, one for manual filtering, which we covered also in part 1, which is basically a very detailed set of filters that you can click through in order to filter the 4 million plus accessions in Genesys. Given the complexity of this manual filtering and the sheer number of options on how to mash up these different filters, we added a way to query the passport data in Genesys using natural language instead of these data filters, which is for now, for the time being, accessible if you're logged in. And you can use this as, if you're familiar with other language AI models like ChatGPT, you can just talk to it, prompt using natural language, and then this AI will implement the filters in the background and share with you the results. I will start with simple examples, like for example, I will say, I want, for example, maize accessions. And the result is basically this Genesys AI is telling you what it understood from your prompt and the results, the number of accessions as a result, and it will automatically filter them here. And you see the visualizations on the right-hand side. In addition to these two things, it will also specify below the specific passport data filters that it implemented. So in addition to seeing those passport data filters here, you can also see them in the filter panel pane here. Excluding historical is always there by default, and the filter for crop maize is added to narrow down 4 million accessions to around 138,000. If you want to remove this filter for crop maize, you can click here on the X button, or you can also click here on Start a totally new search. Um, Before I dive into more specific examples or more detailed examples, I want to show you a bit of buttons that might be interesting. So um, using manual filtering by default, you can toggle in this button here uh, to instruct Genesys to either use manual filtering by default. So whenever you land on the Genesys passport data page, this tab will be automatically open first, or you can toggle it off and it will open to you Genesys AI by default when you first land on this page. It's just a preference. And we also have here below mechanism for feedback on the results that you receive from Genesys AI. Basically, if you, for example, prompted Genesys AI for the crop maize and it gave you something totally an error or something totally unrelated, you can write us here directly your feedback about what happened, what were you trying to do, the results that it gave you, and we receive this and go over it, and we use this feedback in order to improve the AI search. It's very important, and we encourage you to use it. The way it works is that you write anything here and then press on this light bulb, and we will receive it from our side. Um, there's also a disclaimer, and that's important to keep in mind that all of this content is produced by an AI tool, and we cannot guarantee 100% the accuracy and completeness of this information provided. So, for the time being, the most precise way to query Genesys is using manual filtering. You can be 100% sure you are querying for what you want. We just have this disclaimer because, all the results from AI, at least for now, are, you know, just basically on your own risk. But we are trying to improve this as much as we can as we go. So I will give you another bit more complicated example. So I want to type here that I want rights accessions that have been collected before the year 2010, before the year 2010, and let's say from um, the Philippines. So I specified the species. I specified the year of collecting from site and the country of origin, the country where the rice was collected from. So this should give me three different filters. So as we said, first this Genesys AI will tell you what it understood from your prompt and the number of accessions that it filtered. and the specific filters that it implemented. It filters for the crop price, not the genus name. It filtered for the provenance of material, the country of origins, Philippines, and it filtered the collecting date to make it smaller than 2000, January 2010. We see those filters here, and we see 3,000, almost 3,000 accessions. And we see here on the right-hand side in those charts, the distribution of these 3,000 accessions across the different gene banks that hold this material. These are the different gene banks that hold this material. And these are the countries where the gene banks are located. So holding institute and country of holding institute, not to be confused with country where the material was collected from on site. So these 3,000 accessions are conserved in Erie Gene Bank in the Philippines, in Africa Rice and Ivory Coast, and in other gene banks. The crop is rice, and the genus name provided to Genesys oryza and different species. And all of these numbers are actually links that you can click on in order to further narrow down these 3,000 accessions based on, for example, the species. If you click on this link, it will narrow down the 3,000 accessions to 2,900 that are Oryza sativa, in addition to being collected from the Philippines before 2010, etc. I won't go into a lot of detail because we went over that already. You can also visualize this in a table on the map. And if there are available images and further tools you can use on these accessions. I will start a new search and say that I want sorghum accessions conserved in gene banks in Africa that are land races and acquired after the year 2000. So this one sentence contains maybe 5 or more different manual filters. So we have here what the AI understood. It included sorghum as the crop, landrace as the biological status, Africa as the region, and the acquisition date after January of 2000. And those are the filters that it implemented. If you weren't using Genesys AI and you wanted to apply manual filtering, I will toggle here to the manual filter and reset everything and show you how you would have done this manually. It's basically going to the crop and manually selecting a crop, for example, yam, manually selecting the origin of the material, for example, Ivory Coast, and you would select the country based on the ISO code of that country and the collecting date. You would say, for example, 2000 January 1st. And the biological status, you would have to scroll here and go for landrace. So you see, this is a much faster way to query these accessions, but this data, but the manual filtering is, I would say, more precise because instead of selecting a crop, you can actually choose to select the specific taxonomy, for example, the genus rice instead of the crop rice. It gives you more control over the results, but this is faster, I would say, and more efficient. But so you decide how you would like to query Genesis, but we have both options now for you. And we would love to hear your feedback. In case you try it out, let us know. So after this Genesys AI demonstration, and again, based on the user survey, we noticed that it would be good to highlight um, trade data that is available in Genesis as of 2023 in a format that is directly searchable on the platform without having to download files and query them on Excel or in different software. And for that, from the landing page of Genesis, you do not need to be logged in to access this information. You can go to the accession data menu, characterization and evaluation data sets, and you will see that there are over 550 different characterization and evaluation data sets that um, the most from which the most recent ones are in this format that I will present to you now. And we are working with our uh, partner GeneBanks to transform the characterization and evaluation data sets from the old format to the one that can be queried right in Genesis. So you can filter these 550 data sets also by crop or by partner gene bank that published this data. Let's see, for example, let's take an easier one, which is coffee. What's most interesting in coffee, I would say, is the caffeine content. So that's something we have here in Genesis for some of the coffee accessions in Ivory Coast in CNRA. When you scroll on this dataset page, you will see an overview, a description of which part of the project was this characterization part of, or some more details on how it was carried out, some overview, like how many accessions are characterized in this data set and across how many traits. And you will see this big banner in green. And if you click on it, you will then be you will be redirected to the dataset searchable format in Genesis, where you will see first in the first column always the list of accessions that have been characterized, and all of them would be in blue because they would be connected to their passport data that is also in Genesis for the majority of them anyway. So if you click on these links, you will be redirected to the accession details, where you will find more details on the passport data itself, and also the trade data itself, and much more information. Uh, and then you will see in this table, the rest of the columns are going to be the descriptors of these accessions. So we see here the caffeine content, and you can then narrow down these 2,000 accessions, for example, based on their caffeine content. If you want the caffeine content to be more than 3, then you will scroll down on the left-hand side and where you will have the filters for these descriptors. So you can filter them also as you would do for passport data. And for the numerical values, you will always see uh, a minimum and a maximum. So you can say, I want the caffeine content to be at least 3 or at most maximum 3. So I want it to be at least 3. So I narrowed it down to 32 items here. Or if I want it to be the maximum of 3, I narrowed it down to 1,700. And if you want exactly the number, not a range, but the exact number, then you should place this exact number both in the minimum and the maximum. So let's say 3.02 um, in both minimum and maximum. I want to show you categorical descriptors, not just numerical or dates. There's also categorical and scale. Um, I will show you now a maze data set from IITA that had characterized over 600 accessions across 37 traits. And you see the categorical descriptors include, um, for example, um, attitude, degrees, whether it's present, absent. Um, we also have colors, shapes, etc. And the way you would be able to filter those is by ticking or unticking the different values within every descriptor. You can think of it as a multiple choice. You can select many from each descriptor. And the more you select, the more you narrow down by filtering different descriptors, the narrower your results will get. And once you arrive to a number of accessions that is manageable to request from gene banks and with the traits that you are interested in, you can then add those accessions to your list. Think of them as your shopping cart. So by clicking here, this button, and clicking on the radio button, and then clicking on add to my list. And then if you click on my list in the main menu, you will be able to request for material. This will take you through a step-by-step form for you to be able to send out a request for these seeds via Genesys to the different gene banks that conserve these accessions. And then those gene banks will get back to you with more details on the address or if there's any documents to sign between you and them before proceeding. Something that I also wanted to show you in the searchable data sets, because we only looked at the first tab, which is observations and how to filter the accessions based on the observations, but we also have different tabs that you can explore that would be interesting for you if you're not necessarily wanting to request the material, but also kind of analyze the data about these accessions. So we have the overview tab that shows you the distribution of the number of these accessions across um, the different descriptors themselves. So you see here, for example, for this descriptor, the two options are either absent or present. Absent number one or present number two. So how many accessions have this descriptor value as absent? Around 100 versus around 500 for the accessions that have this as present. Um, this is more for you to get an idea about the different how are these 600 accessions distributed across the different observations. You can also compare two different descriptors. How do the values map to one another using a heat map? In the tab here that is called Analyze. So here you would choose two different traits to compare, uh, any two. This only works for the descriptors that are categorical, obviously. and you click apply. And this will create a heat map to compare those two descriptors and how do their values relate to one another when it comes to those 600 accessions. And so you see that the majority of the accessions have both color of scales as present and the color of shelf as number 4 is also present. And this is just the same heat map, but kind of inverted. So we have this descriptor here and this descriptor here instead of the other way around. So it's just the x and y x-axis and y-axis are just flipped, but it's basically essentially the same information. So if you want to use this in a presentation or publication, you can take a screenshot, um, and you can also always change and reset. So other than those two options, you can also create a subset. It's a kind of a do-it-yourself way of narrowing down those 600 items into a smaller subset of accessions based on similar traits that you get to choose from here. And you ask the tool, so you select the traits, and then you ask the tool how many different groupings do you want to create. And in this case, it's a bit extreme. It created one set of 499 accessions that have similar traits, and you can see the different plots. I think this would work better. This would work best in numerical data rather than categorical data. So the analyze button is more for categories like color, shape, etc. And this is, I think, better suited um, for numerical. So I will select, for example, the days. And it's still grouping out of the 600 accessions, 499 that are most closer to one another in the same set. This is based on a tool that we already have in Genesys called the subsetting tool that essentially works by creating similar groupings of accessions, but the subsetting tool works specifically on uh, agroclimatic uh, data sets and only works for accessions that have geographical information. I will also demonstrate it as part of this webinar. But basically, those are the tabs that you can make use of. Also, the description is basically just the metadata and some information about this data set, and you always have the option to download the Excel files, whether the original data set file or the metadata about it, or the MCPD, so the passport data of these accessions that are listed in this data set. And you can also, from here, filter for those accessions. So now I jumped from the characterization data, I jumped to the passport data filters. And there's also one more button that I want to show you, which is show these accessions on the map. So the accessions that have been included in the straight data set on the map. I see a question in the chat about what I presented about Genesys AI. Can you prompt it in different languages, or is it supporting English only? That's a great question. Thank you. Um, we have Genesis available in different languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, for the moment. And you can actually prompt the Genesys AI in those languages as well. So not just in English. I will demonstrate to you, for example, in French. Just a quick note that you would also need to be logged in for now to access the translations as well. So if you want to prompt Genesys AI in French, you go to the passport data um, page in Genesys AI. You can prompt it saying euh, des accessions de riz collectées avant 2010. And the result that it would give you is the same as it would in English. So first, it will tell you what it understood from your prompt in French, the numbers of accessions that it filtered, it narrowed down, and the specific filters that it implemented also in French. Um, and we ask you to send us your feedback. If you also want to prefer in French, then please go ahead. That's the same process. I also see a question in the chat if there's a limit to the size of a prompt that this AI can process in terms of character length. Um, there isn't a limit as far as I know, but I believe there would be a limit to the amount of specific filters that this AI can narrow down to before it hits zero. For example, if you are too specific with your prompts, if you want accessions that are of rice that have been collected at a specific longitude and latitude at a specific day, the prompt might come back with the result that, okay, there's nothing I was able to find. And that's there's also one limit that we implemented here, which is that you cannot really prompt this AI for general topics unrelated to the data that is in Genesis, because some users would use it to, for example, tell us the history of rice or more general things. We tried as much as we can to limit in that sense when it comes to the topics. So I will try to demonstrate to push the limit here. Um, I want to learn how to, I don't know, use Genesys R package. And it would give you basically nothing. It would tell you, I apologize, uh, because that's outside the scope of this particular Genesys AI. But in terms of character limit, as far as I know, we don't have any limits on that. So we covered so far Genesys AI and trade data. And what I want to show you next is might be interesting for you to know, since we mentioned Genesys R, that we have different options to not just query Genesys and use all of its tools just on the Genesys website. So we have a page documenting the Genesys API for you who want to integrate Genesys within an external software for you to query it directly there. I will share also the link in the chat. And this really goes through a lot of detail on how you can make use of the Genesys API. So I won't go into a lot of detail here, But what I want to highlight for you, especially because a lot of you are researchers and might use already R or R Studio, um, what I want to highlight to you is that we created an R package dedicated for um, researchers or whoever wants to analyze the Genesis data without having to download separate sheets of Excel and then import them and then do that process again and again. So I will share a link to the step-by-step how to get started and how to use it also in the chat. So we have a detailed explanation on how to first install the package and all the other packages you would need to, for example, plot the results on a map, um, and how to authenticate um, directly in Genesis. So you can do this authentication also directly in R. Um, then how you can start querying or narrowing down the data using password data filters, but directly in R. And then how you can plot the results either on charts or in different types of charts or on the map. So we have a full tutorial that is much more detailed in GitLab, and it is linked in this article that I will share with you in the chat. Please have a look at it, especially if you are conducting research on the data and you are using the data that is in Genesis. It would save you a lot of time and trouble from having to download separate sheets of file of Excel and then loading them and importing them in different software. So I encourage you to have a look both at the R package and in general our Genesys API options. So besides that, I also want to share with you the different mechanisms for feedback and the different types of support that you can receive from our team at the Crop Trust when it comes to uh, Genesis. So we have two main means of communicating with us. The first one is the Genesis Help Desk. So this is the email here and the contact us form, helpdesk@genesis-pgr.org. Whatever tools that you're trying to use, whatever errors that you might come across on the platform, if you need to generate different visualizations, or if you have research and or if you're looking for certain material and you're not really familiar with the way you can navigate Genesis in order to get to this material or this data, we're always here available on this help desk. So please feel free to reach out. And for those of you who encounter errors and bugs on the platform, and if you would like to report them, our preferred way of doing that is by submitting a ticket or an issue on the GitLab. So Genesis is open source. Anyone can actually access the source code in GitLab. You can also propose code or functionality, so it's totally open source. But you can also report bugs and issues on GitLab as well if you have an account and are familiar with it. So you see the source code in the link at the bottom of the page on the footer, and you see here report an issue that would immediately open your mailbox and um, send an email and start a draft of an email to help desk. So when it comes to the source code in the Genesis backend, You can report an issue by going to issues and clicking on the button new issue and say, describe in the title what is the error that you encountered very briefly. For example, error when filtering for both minimum and maximum at the same time. And then in the description, we would appreciate if you send us a link on the page where you encountered this issue. For example, I encountered this issue in here in this trade data set. So I copy it and I just paste it here. And I say that in this page, I was trying to filter for both min and max. And I had an error message. And we would also appreciate if you paste the error message. That would also be very helpful to us. And once you click on create issue, our team uh, will receive this, and then we can look into it and forward it to the developers that help us maintain Genesys. So those are the two ways that you can communicate feedback to us, both here on GitLab if you're familiar with the platform, or on help desk email. So with that, we have 10 minutes left, and I want to open it up for questions. Um, so feel free to raise your hand, open your mics, and if you have questions after the webinar is over, as I explained, you can always reach us on help desk. This session is being recorded, and as soon as the recording is available, it will come your way via email. It will be published on YouTube, but of course, made anonymized so that nobody's name appears. So I thank you very much for joining today, and looking forward for the next webinar, and wish you all a nice day ahead or nice evening wherever you might be. Thanks a lot.